This episode was created with the support of Free FM, Hamilton, New Zealand's community access media organisation. Visit us at freefm.org.nz.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Rethinking Mental Wellbeing. This is our community podcast where we can talk about everything related to depression and anxiety. So my name is Andre and I want to thank you for being with me over the next half an hour as we share the space of lived experience where we can talk about how to live the best version of our authentic life. So, if you're ready, then I'm ready. Welcome to the podcast. So welcome back. If you're joining me for the first time, then I welcome you to the space. If you are joining me again, then welcome back to the space. So learning to live authentically and to live according to our truth is often a hard thing to do. So why do we find it so hard to learn to live in a very authentic way if that is what we are compelled and driven to do? One of the reasons is because we are learning to reorientate ourselves from being what the world wants us to be, because that's what we've been guided by in our younger years, to becoming who we are, to find our authentic and true version of us. It's about believing a little less about what we are according to the world's view of us, telling us what we should be or need to be or what we have to be. So this reorientation involves us learning to live from the inside out. And in a world that tries to force us to live from the outside in, telling us what we need in life as externally based versions of happiness according to what society tells us, and therefore spending most of our life being led by the world around us. And it's this change of focus that is often a hard thing to adapt to. It's about learning to be internally guided by our authentic nature and by our truth. This takes a lot of practice because it's not only a change of focus, it's a change of priority. And learning to understand that redirecting our focus is not an act of selfishness, but an act of learning how to finally give ourselves the space and voice to be expressed freely into this world. It's about the learning and understanding that we have the right to live, the right to be, the right to do and say the things that line up with our authentic nature without apology. There is a huge freedom with this, and with this freedom comes peace and stillness. In this practice of learning to be authentic in our life, we have to have a framework, a particular framework, that we can pin our experiences through our day onto. But this goes beyond just a framework. This also acts as a voice where your authenticity, your true self, is able to be expressed. It's this framework that becomes the language that your authentic self is learning to use to speak up, to speak out, and to speak through, telling you how to make your mark in this world by living out your truth. Your quality of life and how rewarding life is directly related to whether you are living out and expressing this authentic truth that we all hold. So what is this framework? What is this structure? This goes under the more common name that you may be more familiar with, how to live to your values. So before we get into values, we're going to talk about money, and then we're going to map that conversation onto values. This will all make sense to you as we go through this. So the first rule about money that we're going to start off by talking about is stuff you probably already know. Money is not useful until it's used. So you can have all the money in the bank, you can have all the money in the world, in a safe, in a cardboard box under the bed. But if it's never used, then you're not using it for its intended purpose. And the purpose is the second point about money. Money is exchanged for something of value. So we all know this, that the exchange of something of value often means using money as a form of that exchange. The third point is the amount we pay is the amount of value that we place on that item. So in this context, think of auctions or tenders or something you're renegotiating or bartering for. We will often pay what we think something is worth based on the importance that we place on that item. So if I was to offer you $100 and you offered me $1 for it, I'm not going to want to agree to that because it doesn't match the value of the $100. I would be worse off. But if I offered you the same $100 and you offered me $200 for it, I would want to take that because you're offering me more than the value of what I'm offering you. So you're only going to pay for what you believe something is worth based on the importance of that item. So take house auctions, for instance. You will only bid in an auction up to the level of what you believe the property is worth and what you can afford. And this leads me to the fourth statement about money. If something is important, we will pay highly. But if we can't afford it, it'll cost us greatly. So what does this mean? If I want the latest iPhone that is just about to come out, but I can't afford it, and the importance of why I want it overrides my ability to afford it, I'm going to do what I can do to get it. So I may go to friends and ask them for a loan. I may borrow money from a loan shark or a bank. I will beg and borrow because if it's that important for me to get the phone, I'm going to do what I can to get it. We see this with concert tickets, where ticket sculptors purchase a ton of tickets for the purpose of selling them, sometimes up to 10 times the amount. But people still buy them, even at that massively elevated price, because they are buying the importance of that experience. So these are the lessons about money. Now let's transpose those onto the frame of how we can relate that to values. Just like money, the first rule about values is that values are not useful until they're used. So I can sit here all day and tell you how much of a compassionate, caring, kind, and honest person that I am, but that's not demonstrating my values to you. That's demonstrating how good of a storyteller I am. And it's all too easy these days to convince people about our values. And so we master the art of storytelling with exciting stories and captivating situations because it's easier than having to live them out and run the risk of rejection, humiliation, or even shame because we may have a belief that other people's values are more important than my values. Then we put our values onto the back burner. But we do this in exchange for acceptance or validation, to feel significant in the eyes of others and to feel that we belong. But it comes at a cost of our authentic self losing its voice under the weight of the belief that you have no choice. And it's so easy to speak of your values as the storyteller, but it's harder to live out your values and become the story that you're telling. This next part is one I want to spend a bit more time on. And that is values are exchanged for something of importance. So to illustrate this, I'm going to talk about the value of kindness. Again, that's probably one that we can most relate to. There's a beautiful quote that says, "What we crave creates the appetite for our actions." So what does that mean? We either exchange our values for the approval and validation of other people, which comes from a place that we may have learnt from our younger version of ourselves, of the lesson that in order to get accepted, validation, or approval, it has to cost me the misuse or suppression of a value. And the currency to get approval, validation, or acceptance is the price that we pay. This looks like being the nice person. It's the person that'll do anything for anyone. Is the person that will always be thinking of others before themselves. This is the act of being nice, but it's attempting to masquerade as the value of kindness. But chronic niceness means being the poster child for niceness as we dance monkey to the different tunes of instructions to feast on the morsels of praise and validation that's thrown back at us. But the price we pay is the suppression of our truth. This is changing the value of kindness and compassion that is translated into a morphed version of being nice. And what's the difference between being nice and being kind? Kindness is typically driven by genuine care and empathy. It's a desire to help others and comes from a deep sense of compassion. But being nice, on the other hand, may be driven to being more socially accepted and often feeds a desire to be approved of that kind of scratches the psychological itch to be heard and understood. Of course, I'm not saying never be nice. What I'm saying is be aware of what you're exchanging nice for and what the cost is. Another reason why we suppress our values could be that we're hiding them. In this case, the example value that we are using of kindness may be to avoid being hurt. So see if this sounds familiar. I've done nothing but bend over backwards to help this person. I've done this for them, I've done that for them. I've given them this and I've given them that, and they've done nothing to repay me. So now I'm just going to stop being nice because people just take advantage of me. So the thing that's going on here is that you still have a need to show that value of kindness. But the exchange rate is wrong because the trade-off is the payoff from what others give you. One of the issues with that is that the payback from others is often expected to be returned in the same proportion of effort that we demonstrated to them in the first place. A value, though, that is authentically expressed has a payoff that feeds your authentic self first. And it does this by the expression of that value that is filtered through you first. So in the case of kindness, you always filter that kindness through being kind to yourself first. So values is the language of your authentic voice, not to be used to be liked or approved of, or to get something from others. Values should never be to get something, but instead it's an expression of truth to give yourself something. So let me give you an example. This is one I often use in my workshops. If I was to go out and buy you the latest phone, the most up-to-date phone, and give it to you as a gift, and then you say, "Oh, thanks," and then walk off, I may immediately feel a sense of frustration if my motive was to get something from you. Because thanks doesn't equate to the unspoken and unknown effort I put into saving the money to get you that phone. I may have specifically worked overtime. I may have gone without things in order to save money to get you that phone. But you don't know that. All you know is that I've given you a phone. But if I didn't get the response that I expected, that is in proportion to the effort and sacrifice that I put in to get you that phone, I'm going to feel resentful. Now, maybe it's a few months later and I'm asking you for a favor. So I go ahead and ask you, "No, I can't help you, sorry, I'm busy." My mind may immediately go to, "Well, hey, I gave you a phone. The least you can do is to help me when I ask you, because now you have a debt with me that needs to be repaid." A while later, I may ask something else of you, and once again, you may say no. But now I'm really annoyed because I bought you a phone. So therefore, you owe me something of equal value, but you're not paying me back in the way that I expect. And now I feel shortchanged. I feel angry. I even feel bitter. That's it, I say to myself. I'm never doing anything nice for you or anyone else ever again. And so now you feel, because people take advantage of your kind nature, that you can no longer give yourself permission to live your values out in life. But now you know that kindness is not the actual value being expressed. It's your action of being nice for a trade-off, for a purpose of maybe being accepted, appreciated, to feel significant, or to be liked. And the script you repeat that says, "I will never give myself permission to ever be kind to other people," becomes stronger. And so you suppress the voice of your authentic self even deeper. Now this leads to the next point, because then we end up hiding what we think is our value in order to avoid continuing being hurt. And now we're not only annoyed at other people, now we are annoyed and frustrated at ourselves. So we understand now that the first rule about living out your values is we have to first live them through us so that we can filter out the benefits of living out these values before they are offered into the world. This is essential for our well-being, but difficult to put into practice if we've been taught not to think about ourselves first, or even not to think about ourselves at all. So in this case of kindness and compassion that I am using, and to be fair, I'm given a bit of a hard time to, but any value will fit into these examples as well. We need to filter these values through being kind and compassionate to ourselves first. And when we do that, our life becomes an extension of that value, not as a tool for trade-off. Those values can be freely given out to those around us in our world, but we're not looking for a payback or a reciprocation first, because we've met this need ourselves, so nothing is owed back to us. As my teacher taught me, always give out of the excess of what you've given yourself first. And that way you can give and give and give, because you're always giving yourself first the benefits of that value. And there is nothing to exchange from other people. There are no conditions wrapped in that value, because we've met this need ourselves, because it's been filtered the right way. Show yourself the same kindness and compassion that you want other people to show you. Then you have it in the right order. Freedom happens when we're able to live authentically through the language of our values. So when you live out your values, you live through your authenticity by this expression of your values. For many of us, though, we won't consciously know every single one of our values. We may know a few, maybe even the top 10. If you've been to a seminar or course that teaches values, you'll probably know your top 20. But most of us will know at least 3 to 5. And you don't have to know every single one of them intellectually for you to start living them out. Because we've developed a system that tells us when we have not lived to a value that we deem as important, or lived out the right way. This system is an emotional state where we feel a sense of being out of balance or out of harmony with ourselves. We may even feel a sense of betrayal or guilt. Psychologists have a name for this. This is our state of being in cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance is the space between your thinking, in other words, what I didn't want to do, and your behavior, I did it anyway. When your beliefs and your behaviors don't line up with each other, you are in this place of feeling out of balance and out of harmony with yourself. So let me put this into context. And again, this is an example that I use in my workshops. Let's pretend you're walking down the street and you see a group of people, and one of them drops $100. What you do or don't do will be a reflection of where you placehold the values in your life that is tied up within the action. So if you have values of honesty, integrity, maybe equality, kindness, compassion, and then your instinctive response is to go up and tell them that you've dropped the money. But if you don't do it and they walk off without noticing they've dropped the money, and now no one is around, and what you say to yourself is the story that has 2 possible outcomes: doing what you need to do or doing what you want to do. Doing what you need to do lines up with your values, and living out your value by what you do next with your actions, or doing what you want to do and picking up the money and using it for yourself. So if you pick up the money, and this is an action that goes against your values, you're going to be telling yourself a story, which is designed to make yourself feel better about the action that is now opposed to your value. You'll be telling yourself a story to make what you've done sit better with you. That may be something like, I'm going to pick up this money because now I can use this for my children. That is a story that makes the cognitive dissonance or the uncomfortableness feel justified, therefore making you feel better. And we're great master storytellers. We are very convincing to make this cognitive dissonance, the thing that makes us uncomfortable, feel better. So let's go back to this money on the ground, that no one is around, But now you've got 3 of your mates with you. One of them says, "Hey, there's $100 on the ground. Let's go and pick it up and get some beers." Your 2 other friends agree. But inside, your authentic nature is screaming out to you, because now we find ourselves in a social setting with values that are different to yours. This is where we experience conflict, because we may feel the social pressure to conform. So we're going to experience the threat of social rejection if we don't conform. And so we conform to avoid the anticipated pain of rejection. And we conform to avoid the humiliation we get from that. And once we conform to what the rest of the group wants, we fit into the group. But our actions have now portrayed our values. And now we've exchanged the external conflict of not fitting in for an internal conflict, where we now fit in, but it costs us our authentic self being expressed. We've exchanged the social rejection for self-rejection. We've exchanged humiliation for guilt. And so we will often bargain with ourselves that it's easier to suffer internally than it is to be publicly humiliated. And we spend the day internally punishing ourselves by living with this cognitive dissonance, this feeling of imbalance between our thoughts and our actions. It's also important to know that the way we live out our values may be different from person to person. So let's go back to the situation where you saw money on the ground. If you were to pick it up and maybe you were to ask people around you who is in the immediate vicinity to try and track down the person who may have lost it, but you had no luck in doing that, that may be enough for you to feel that you've done and lived within the structure of your values of honesty, kindness, integrity, so on and so on. The person next to you, though, may turn around and say to you, "No, you haven't done it right. What you need to do is go and hand it into the police station and then wait to see if anyone's claimed it. And if they don't, and they say you can come back and claim it, then you've done all you can." Another person who you're with may turn around and say to you, "Actually, you're both wrong. What you need to do is to give it to charity because it was never yours in the first place." The point with all of these is that you are the only person that knows whether you have actioned out the language of your value in the appropriate way. And you know this by how you feel. This is a very internal measure. When you feel that sense of, "I've done everything I can, I feel I have honored my value, and I can with a clear conscience without having to create a story that lessens the potential uncomfortableness, then I know that I have lived to that value." So the more stories and scripts that you convince yourself of the reasons why you are doing what you are doing, the more you're not living to your value. So you're going to have many stories about slightly different versions and expectations of how to live your value, and this will be according to other people. But you only need to measure it against your interpretation of your value. One of our challenges we find in life is learning how to reorientate ourselves from being what the world wants us to be to becoming who we truly are. This means living from the inside out, in a world that often forces us to live from the outside in, and shifting our focus to be internally guided by our authentic nature takes practice. The shift is not only a change of focus, but it's a change of priority, that it's not selfish, but it's a way to give ourselves the space and voice for our authentic nature to be expressed. So this framework of living a values-driven life is something that we can pin our experiences onto. This framework acts as a voice to our true self and enables it to be expressed. It is a language that your authentic self is speaking through. The quality of our lives and how rewarding it is directly related to whether we're living out and expressing this authentic nature through our values. We talked about the fact that values are not useful till they're used. It's easy to become the storyteller, but a lot harder to become the story. Values are exchanged for something of importance. For example, kindness is a value that is driven by genuine care and empathy. However, being nice may be driven by social expectations or a desire for approval. When we hide our values For whatever reason, we are suppressing our authentic nature. Living out our values requires us to live through them ourselves, filtering the benefits before passing them on to other people. We need to show ourselves the same kindness and compassion that we want others to show you. This allows you to live authentically through your values. Knowing and living out your values is essential for being authentic. So that's all I've got for this episode. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you've got something useful from this discussion. And if you have any questions you would like us to discuss on future episodes, then please email me at rethinkingmentalwellbeing@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. So until then, go well, go in peace, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
This Free FM podcast was brought to you with support from New Zealand On Air.